Story 1. A university freshman turned in a paper on the Treaty of Versailles that conformed to no known formatting system I had ever seen. There didn't even seem to be paragraphs. Assuming that his computer had jumbled it up somehow when he turned it in, I went to give it back to him in class one day so he could fix it. He informed me it was intentional. The format meant the paper was to be read as a rap, which he proceeded to do for me in the few minutes before class started. It was incredible. D+. Story 2. Not a teacher, but a fellow classmate. The least intelligent member of my geography class stole my homework assignment from my bag and tried to hand it in as his own. I told the teacher after class, and she looked through the pile and said, "Don't worry." He didn't even attempt to remove my name from the paper. He basically just handed my homework in for me. Had something similar happen when I was a kid. I handed my homework in, and then halfway through the day, my teacher came up to me, holding 3 pieces of homework, 2 in my face and 1 in another hand, asking, "Are either of these yours?" When I asked about the third, she said that someone had already written their name on it. I looked closer and saw that the third one was in fact mine, but someone else's name was there too. Not instead of, mind you, my name was still there. He just wrote his name in the box, not even covering mine. And here's the kicker. I wrote my homework in pencil, so he could have erased my name or at least tried covering it with his own, but instead he wrote, in pen, his own name next to mine. I don't know why he did it, but I think the reason was either 1, he was trying to steal my homework and he's an idiot, or 2, he genuinely thought it was his, because he's an idiot. Story 3. I assigned students to do a group presentation of a story from mythology at the end of the school year. I told them they could choose Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Norse, or any other system they choose. 2 students chose a story from Norse mythology about Thor. They presented the story, which included characters like Loki, Captain America, Iron Man, etc., completely seriously. I spoke to them at the end of class, and they had no clue that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was not a part of Norse mythology. Story 4. In the last few weeks before the AP exam, I give my classes a series of practice tests, written by College Board, to take in class under a time constraint to give them practice. One student, let's call him Bill, always tried to cheat in my class. I had gotten sick of putting in the effort to catch him, and it didn't matter, because the entire point of the class was to prepare for the AP exam. Bill started off each test by staring at the page and answering 1 or 2 questions. Then, as always, he asked to go to the bathroom during the test. I let him go, and he took his phone, of course. He returns and frantically bubbles in the rest of the test and turns it in early. I have to hand it to him. Bill was great at memorizing letters for the answers of the practice tests, but he failed the AP exam. Story 5. Okay, so I had a student in middle school that couldn't read. That wasn't a huge deal. Kid had issues. Once he got angry at me and told me he was going to rip off my buttons. It may have been literal or figurative. Didn't matter. Remember, issues. It was my job to teach him to read. He should have already been in high school. He was 14 and in middle school. I worked individually with this kid, every single day. Finally, I just asked him what he was going to do for a living if he couldn't read and wouldn't try. He gave me a pretty standard answer. "Oh, play basketball or sell drugs." I should mention, he was barely over 5 feet tall. I worried about him. He was my student for 2 years. Eventually, he moved on and I switched to high school. So, 20 years later, I get curious. I remember most of my students, and this kid had a name that stood out a bit. I Google his name, hoping he won't be in prison. A lot of my former students are. I found him right away. He's a professional basketball player for Ukraine. Retired now, but still, good for him. Made himself proud. He turned 15 in middle school. He did learn how to read. He graduated and went to college. Apparently, he did struggle for a while, but he's human. His history was not ideal. I'm concerned about naming him because of his privacy. He played from 2006 to 2010. Cool. Gold. My father wasn't sure if I should go into education. Finally paying off. Story 6. One of the fellas in my university first-year computer programming class stared at the wall, at the same spot. The whole class. Every class. He'd walk in on time, sit down, open his folder, and stare at the wall. and didn't ever take a note that I saw. At the end of the wall staring duration of the class, he'd close his likely still blank folder, get up, and leave, without a word. I see him from time to time at the grocery store, collecting up the carts. I feel a little bad for whoever funded his education, but am pleased that he has a steady job. Oh, I had some classmates like this in college. There was one guy who just completely failed to grasp basic networking concepts. Like, I had to help him set a static IP on a computer once, and it was a whole ordeal. Mind you, this was not an introductory class. Later on, he managed to get his security, bragged all the time about how he got a perfect score on it. When you asked how he studied for it, he replied, "I used Big League." That may not be the actual name since it's been a few years, but the program he referenced is a brain dump program. He just memorized the answers and then took the test. This became very apparent when you started actually asking him firewall questions. Had no clue. How he managed to get a job in IT is beyond my understanding. Story 7. My 8th grade physical science lab partner took the top off of one of those oil burners, poured the oil all over our desk, and then lit it on fire. Like, on purpose. Did you think it would be less flammable because it's on the table now? Hilariously, even though I was the one who put the fire out and had nothing to do with lighting it, I still got suspended too. I guess the lesson I was supposed to learn was to never help put out a fire. Story 8. Here's one from my mom. The class ate at one of those medieval-themed restaurants on a field trip, and one little brat took advantage of the setting, and the overflowing cleavage. He referred to the waitress as his wench, and demanded she butter his bread. Also, she would bend over, to better reveal her bountiful bosom. He ordered the turkey legs, then wielded them theatrically, like Henry VIII, while thanking the waitress for making him excited. When my mom got home, she said he was a harassment lawsuit waiting to happen. Story 9. I'm late to the thread, but I have a winner. The class was an applied math course for high schoolers, and we held a paper airplane design contest. The rule was that you could use anything on the table to make your airplane, and that the person who threw theirs the furthest down the hallway would win. The table had all manners of things on it: printer paper, construction paper, tape, rulers, compasses, toothpicks, duct tape, paper clips, masking tape, a stapler, and even Elmer's glue. Well, the class went to work, and for an hour designed some very interesting airplanes. Except for Tim. Tim sat quietly and chatted with his friends until about 30 seconds were left to build. Then he went up to the table, grabbed a few things, and sat back down to wait. When it came time to throw, it turned out that his airplane was a piece of paper wrapped around the stapler. While the lighter and more complex planes drifted to the side and landed early or hit the hallway walls, Tim's plane slammed straight into the door on the other end of the wall with a satisfying clunk. Tim's ridiculous creation beat everyone else out and won the contest easily, while technically obeying the rules of the competition. I really hope that guy ends up working for NASA. My other favorite student was a kid who ate a glue stick for $5. He figured it was edible because it said non-toxic. Technically correct, but so wrong. He had to go home due to the uncontrollable vomiting. I'm not sure if he was ever paid the $5 either. My third favorite was a middle schooler, whose mom was dismissed by another student in class. His reaction, not having any decent weapons on him, was to rip out the 3-ring part of a 3-ring binder and use the prongs to attack the other student's forearm. Unfortunately, that kid isn't going anywhere but juvie, unless he can get help with his anger issues. Too bad, because it was an ingenious improvised weapon, and he could probably use that creativity some other way. Story 10. I had my students write 2 truths and a lie so the class could get to know one another. One student writes, "I had 4 concussions. I play hockey. I have gold." He said that the lie is that he has gold. I told our phys ed teacher about it at lunch, and she says, "What does he mean he has gold?" I said, "Well, that was the lie." Well then, he lied twice, because he's had 7 concussions. No wonder he's so slow. Story 11. This isn't really the kid's fault, more the parents', but my sister teaches in Hong Kong, generally 3 to 4-year-olds. She had this one kid, called Enzo if I remember right, kept acting out, completely ignoring my sister and her TA when they spoke to him, and doing badly in the class work they're given. He also didn't speak, like at all, and tended to play by himself. So my sister called his parents in to discuss it, voiced her concerns that there might be behavioral problems, maybe something deeper seated. His parents then confided in her that it's probably not that, more that the kid didn't speak a lick of English or Cantonese, i.e., the two languages used in the school, and most of Hong Kong. They were both relatively affluent Italians, so they'd raised the kid speaking Italian and lied that he spoke English fluently so he could get admitted into the school, as it was a requirement that they have a basic understanding. My sister raised her concerns with the principal after she had the meeting, and they responded to just moving the kid to another class. She said she still sees him sitting alone during lunch breaks. I really feel for the kid though. He's young, and he's pretty much been alienated, and won't learn properly because his parents are so dead set on shoving him into the most expensive school, assuming he'll even learn well. Ex-Cub Scout leader here. While your story is a lot more heart-wrenching, I think I had a similar problem with one of the kids in my group. He had recently moved to my country from France, and had enrolled with our Scouts group shortly after. Kid kept acting up, refused to join in with games, would suddenly get really quiet and wander off, etc. We tried speaking to him in both my native language and English. We were a fairly international bunch, and a lot of the kids spoke English as a second language. Also, this particular kid's mom spoke English quite well, so we expected similar from her son. Nothing seemed to work. We ended up calling in the parents for a talk, since we were worried. And this is where we found out that 1. This kid had anxiety issues in groups. 2. Only spoke French. And 3. Was enrolled in a French school where they didn't teach English or NL. And of course, they spoke solely in French at home. It was ridiculous. Apparently, the parents, of which, bonus, only mom spoke anything other than French, had hoped that thrusting him into our group without saying anything about the aforementioned issues, he'd pick up the language more quickly by necessity. We ended up solving most of the problem by making me his main communicator, since I was the only one who could so much as order a sandwich in French, and letting him watch the games first before we let him join in, so he would understand our explanations of the games better. Turns out that he was a smart kid, and together with some help from the other kids, the one time they banded together to wreak anything other than utter havoc, he ended up learning words and phrases in English and NL quite quickly. His favorite phrase? He cheated. Story 12. Used to teach English in Japan. Had a 12-year-old kid who would take off his socks and chew on his toenails in the middle of my lessons. Had a 4-year-old kid who would run at top speed toward the wall, throw himself into it, stumble around going ouch for a few seconds, then do it all again, for an hour straight if we would let him. Had a 7-year-old who stripped down to his underpants, then skipped around the room singing the Pokemon theme song for the entire class. Finally got him dressed again, just as the lesson ended. He looked up at me and said in complete seriousness, "Sensei, I did a good job." Kids, man, they're weird. Story 13. Been a history teacher for 3 months and was teaching about the Middle Colonies and how it was the breadbasket of America. The next day as a warm-up, I ask what the breadbasket is. She rose her hand, and without her even skipping a beat, starts going off about how I'm so dumb because it's called the chicken basket, where you get your tenders, 2 sides, and it also comes with bread. But that isn't what it's called. This poor girl has a lot more stories. This one is the one that stands out to me the most. Other stories include wondering how Obama was the first black president because she thought Abraham Lincoln was black. Her reasoning behind it was that he was really tall. Granted, she's also black. Yeah. Along with that, I've had to explain that we did have color back then. She couldn't believe that people before the 1950s still had color, as only the TVs and photos were black and white. She constantly calls people cockatoos. 3 weeks ago, she asked which history I'm teaching. I honestly don't know if I really suck as a teacher or if it's her. Mind you guys, I teach 8th grade US history. I really wanted to believe all kids are smart, but I'm just slowly not going to hold on to that belief anymore. These are the highlights. Ask again next year, and I'll have stories from multiple kids I want to reap in that sweet, sweet karma. Story 14. My sister is a teacher for a local school. Like a great many teachers, she's also responsible for a form group. In this case, a rowdy and rambunctious group of 15-year-olds she'd inherited from a newly retired teacher. Some kids stand out more than others, and not always for the right reasons. The epitome of that rule existed in my sister's form group. She had the misfortune to be called Xena by her Tumblr feminist mother, and Xena herself had followed firmly in her mother's footsteps. She was considered unpopular, and certainly the other kids were unfair and cruel, but she didn't help matters herself. My sister has told many stories of Xena, up to and including the time she spontaneously began speaking in an accent, which sounded like the bastard child of a Pakistani accent, Irish, and a speech impediment. The accent vanished as mysteriously as it had happened, over the course of the lunch hour. The time she claimed powers of clairvoyance and chemistry. The kid torching pencils with a Bunsen burner apparently never particularly cared if their great-aunt Doreen wanted to warn them of misfortune. The time she shaved her head and refused to wear her uniform because it was stifling her creativity. The John Cena meme was in full swing, and Xena had earned the nickname John Xena, owing to her buzz cut and unfortunate head shape. Kids would hum his theme song upon seeing Xena in the school. A memo was sent around the faculty concerning the matter, but half of the staff were convinced that John Cena was a politician. My sister was running improvisation drills when Xena broke in with one of her prime stories. She was the daughter of a Mauritian man named Jonathan. She said, by the way, her skin was the color of milk, smooth and pale, a man of great importance. She'd been born in Mauritius and swiftly smuggled over to the UK with her mother. Born and raised in England, as a newborn. There was a beat of stunned, awkward silence, until a particular shit of a child screeched, "John Cena!" and slammed his mate's head into the desk. Story 15. Not a teacher, but I work as a bouncer, and on Saturday, some girl was persistently trying to get into my bar, but looked young and didn't have ID with her. After telling her no about 30 times and her complaining about how everyone hated on her, a guy walked in and told us he's one of her high school teachers and that she's 17. She took off awfully quick when he showed up, and I can only imagine how things went in school the next day. I once had a couple exchange students steal from my store when I was managing an LID. They walked out of the store, and we followed closely after them. We turned the corner and they stopped talking to their teacher. We patiently waited while they finished talking to the teacher, all while getting strange looks from him. He started to walk away, and we immediately told the kids we need the hats they stole back, to which they replied, "We will give them back, but can we do it somewhere else? That's our teacher." Like I was going to cut them a break after they stole. Teacher notices there's a problem and comes back and absolutely laid into them, telling them they were going to go to jail and get expelled. We had no intent on pressing charges. They were only around 15 and stole 2 hats. But my goodness, if that teacher didn't put the fear of God into them. It turns out they were spoiled rich kids from another country who actually had the money to pay, but thought stealing would be cooler. We ended up getting a call from the school. They had to write an apology letter for us, and they had to do 30 hours of volunteer work for the charity of our choice. They also threatened to shut down the school's exchange program because of them, but I never heard what came of it after that. Story 16. My mom was a substitute for 5th grade teachers. She told me how this one kid had so many anger issues. This kid would be sitting in his desk playing Legos or something, then out of nowhere flip the desk, start punching the other kids while screaming at the top of his lungs. He also wasn't a small kid, and my mom isn't a big person, so when my mom tried to calm him down, he only got more angry and ripped a necklace off of her and tackled her to the floor, which was when 3 other grown men pulled the kid off of her. She got to go home early, and she got paid for the necklace that was broken. You would think that someone would find out that this kid was mentally handicapped before 5th grade. Story 1. Got a full ride to Harvard, did an internship his first summer at Intel, and was killed by a drunk driver a few weeks after arriving in California. Couldn't believe it when it happened 25 years ago. Still can't really believe it. Story 2. The smartest kid in my school was really popular, and he was one of my closest friends. But when he graduated, he left everyone and everything behind, including his family. He even changed his name. I found out this little bit of information because a friend went to an academic conference and showed me a group photo, and he was in it. I exclaimed, "That's my friend Pascal." He kept his first name, but his last name was an anagram of his original name. Story 3. There are 2. I remember one of them crying when they got an A- on a test in like 7th grade. One of them, the one who cried, is an executive in a Fortune 500 company. Nothing special, but making a lot of money. The other one is a brain surgeon. Story 4. After never even having smoked a cigarette or drank alcohol in high school, straight A's all the way through, he got a full ride to a really good university. As a freshman, he dropped acid, walked out in front of a car, and was killed. Sort of reminds me of a college friend. He was straight, no drugs or alcohol. I think he even stayed away from caffeine. Said addiction ran in his family, so it made sense. Decided though that immediately after graduation he wanted a huge party and had his first taste of alcohol. Got insanely trashed, but survived for about 20 years. He died of liver failure due to severe alcoholism at the age of 41. I hate that I remember where he was when it started, but what did we know? Story 5. He went to MIT, works for Apple, and has a very expensive home in California. He also has a wife and 4 kids and seems to be very happy. I remember he was programming games in high school and was valedictorian. A big nerd who became a wealthy big nerd. Story 6. Went to a big college, got a degree in tech, now makes 6 figures and owns a townhouse outside of Baltimore. He lives with his grandmother mainly, smokes a shitload of weed, flies a girl from Colorado to f***ing smoke with. I married his sister. Story 7. Dropped out of college to marry and support the much younger woman he got pregnant. Now, 30 years later, owns a board game store with a large back room for miniature painting and games and plays dad to half the neurodivergent kids in town. Still married to the same woman too. It's not a high-flying life, but he makes a difference to so many people. To make you all feel better, he was 23, I think, and she was 18. A big age gap when you're young. It was also in the Netherlands, where at least at the time, I've been gone a while, we didn't really care so much as long as it wasn't a 10-year difference or one of them was under 15. Teenagers have drives. It happens. Story 8. Had a full ride through Berkeley. Ended up experimenting a lot with hallucinogens. Started to believe he was a star child or starseed and was from another planet. Ended up starving himself in a national park to die with the Earth so he could meet other star children. F***ing miss and love you, buddy. Story 9. Unfortunately, the smartest kid in my class in middle school ended his life in 8th grade. He was also a brilliant violinist. I was his stand partner in the orchestra. I was proud to be his brother's stand partner in high school. Rest in peace, Connor. Story 10. When I was in middle school, we had a super smart kid join later on in the semester that was always teased because he was above everyone else mentally. I think in 8th grade he was doing 10th or 11th grade mathematics. Any test that he took, he passed with flying colors. Hardly even studied. He befriended me. I was kind of quiet in middle school because of stuff going on at home. His mom always made me an extra sandwich whenever she made his lunch. I lost contact after graduation, but a few years later when I was a sophomore in college, I decided to look him up on Facebook and couldn't believe what I saw. There was my friend, the Brainiac, smoking out of a huge bong as his profile picture. I think he had to take it down because when I looked him up again, he had pics of him drinking out of a funnel. Story 11. The smartest kids I knew in school turned to alcohol and doing really dumb shit. Maybe not all, but quite a few. The bullies didn't amount to anything either. The mediocre ones in the middle were the ones that had successful careers and normal lives. My bullies became cops. No joke. Of the 3 people I knew from high school who eventually became cops, all of them were bullies. Only one of them really bullied me, and it was only for a little while until I confronted him in front of some of our mutual friends and asked him why he was being a dick and what had I ever done to him. Then he laid off me, but he was still a bully to other people. Dude had rage issues too, and the reason he started f***ing with me was because I refused to follow his orders. When I found out he was a cop a couple of decades later, I was just like, holy crap, I'd hate to ever get pulled over by him. He acted like one of those cops you see foaming at the mouth, screaming in people's faces for refusing to let him shit on their rights before he even had any official authority. Can't imagine what he turned into once he got some. Story 12. That was me, valedictorian of my high school, voted brainiest by my peers for the school yearbook, highest university entrance grades of my school, quintessential nerd. I went into chemical engineering because that was the degree brainy kids pursued. I was okay at the job, but never great. Bounced around across 5 different manufacturing companies. mostly in entry-level positions or close to it. Had some mild successes, got a few promotions, got made redundant a lot. Finally secured a management position after 10 years, and realized I absolutely hated every aspect of the job. Did a lot of soul-searching. It really was a massive shock to my system that I had failed at something that was meant to be for the smart people. Took a lot more for me to redefine my identity without being smart at the heart of it. These days, I teach chemistry at the local high school. I absolutely love it. Kind of regret that I turned my nose up for years because I was too smart to be a teacher. But I can't change the past, so all that's left to do is learn from it. Story 13. Died in a car accident sophomore year. I loved her. First person I felt those feelings for. I could remember the first time I saw her in kindergarten. We also learned to golf together my freshman year. It was tragic because she had so much potential and died overachieving, trying to get to school early for jazz band practice. It was snowing and school hadn't been delayed or canceled yet, as our superintendent liked to always wait until the last minute. She hit a slick spot and collided with a semi. Story 14. He was an idealist, became a priest and served in the Vatican, became disillusioned and left the church. Got 2 master's degrees and died by his own hand. He was a truly good person who couldn't marry his ideals with the reality of the church. Story 15. She got a PhD in neuroscience from Stanford, and I think she's a professor or associate professor somewhere now. She was probably the sweetest girl I'd ever met. I was an intelligent underachiever, and I ended up in a few AP courses with her because our teacher saw my test scores and refused to continue to let me do dip things with my dip friends. She was always super proud of me when I actually showed up and put some effort in, and lo and behold, got excellent marks. Honestly, she really turned around the last 2 years of high school for me. Also, she's wicked hot now. A hot genius. Story 16. He spent years researching how to cloak himself like the Predator from the 1987 film with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He got surprisingly far before he ended up getting a top-secret government job. Haven't heard from him since. Maybe he's a secret agent. Maybe he actually became the Predator? No one knows. Story 17. From one school, he was razzed, not quite bullied, because he wanted to be a truck driver. He later graduated as valedictorian from our local VOCTEC school, got an associate's degree in diesel mechanics, did that for a few years, and later went back to the community college and has taught it since the late 1980s. He would have been a drastic failure as, say, a doctor or a lawyer. From another school, she and her husband are probably sovereign citizens. I sure wish I was making that up. Story 18. She married a religious fruitcake 12 years older than she was almost immediately after graduation and started pumping out kids. Never went to college. Has never had a job. Spends her days on Facebook shaming people for being sinners. Story 19. He did his undergraduate degree and couldn't afford a master's, so he ended up working in offices for 15 years where he had to hide his intelligence around his coworkers. Finally founded his own company and is now in politics where he can be the smartest person in the room and people will respect it. Good guy, just way above most people's level of intelligence, and has had to hide it most of his life. Story 20. Went to college for mathematics as one of the most promising young minds in the Midwest. Was in college for a year before switching to study Spanish. Dropped out a year later. Currently works at GameStop 20 minutes from his parents' house, where he lives. He was a good friend of mine, but I recently learned that he considered me his best friend. It's such a shame that his intelligence is going to waste. He is literally so smart and has such a talent for math, but he seems content with his life. Who am I to judge? As long as he's happy, hell, as long as he's alive, it's not a waste. People with intelligence aren't obligated to go off and be rocket scientists or millionaires, or else be considered a waste, you know? Working at GameStop is perfectly respectable, for him or anyone else. I know you likely didn't mean that unkindly, but I feel obligated to say this for all the people out there who feel afraid that what they do is considered a waste. They hear it and fear it too often. Story 21. I was one of those. I got my BA and then dropped out of grad school. Now I make $18K in a developing country, and I'm reasonably happy with my life after about 7 years of on and off suicidal depression. Story 2. He was drafted in the 7th round by the St. Louis Cardinals and was getting his master's in biomed at 21 to 22. Played a few years in lower ball after signing around $250,000 signing bonus.
Now he's a nuclear medicine doctor. Story 23. That was me. I'm now a stay-at-home dad of 4 wonderful kids and in a loving 16-year marriage. My wife is my best friend. While I may not have reached my full potential academically, I'm happy. Very happy. I realized that life is too short to care about anything other than living my life the way that I want to, not the way that I'm expected to. Story 24. He got someone pregnant immediately out of high school, so he decided not to go to the Ivy League school he had a full scholarship to and stay at home to be a dad. He got his associates at the local community college and is now a science teacher at the same high school he graduated from. I talk to him every once in a while when I'm down there to visit my parents. He's always asking about my job because he wanted to be a software engineer when he graduated high school, and the community college didn't even have regular computer classes, so he settled for some environmental science degree. Story 25. Overdose. Kid was valedictorian and probably the highest person at our school at any given moment, and that's saying something considering the town we were in. Sad as fuck. R.I.P. Story 26. I'm late here, so no one will bother to read, but I'll look back on this one fondly. He went on to ace the board exam, twice in 2 different fields. I couldn't be prouder. Most importantly, he became my boyfriend and changed many perspectives I had in life. I'd have never lived up to this day were it not for him, and I hope I did and still do my best to care for him the same. It wasn't always a shiny day. He had very depressive episodes, with lots of doubts and being forced to face heavy pressure. We had a toxic relationship in between, and a lot of things weren't healthy at all. I even projected a lot of insecurities, especially being with this very intelligent person compared to my inferior self. Imagine hormones and adulting mixing up. Wow. Fortunately, we are in a so much better state right now. Man, was it a journey. We changed and developed as our own individuals, with lots of moments shared together. I'm lucky to have him. I don't care if he's smart or whatever. He's funny and is able to listen to me rant about whatever favorite thing I have for the day. He's not a cat person, but damn, I'm trying to convert him through the cat subreddits here, and I'll be here for him. Story 27. All the pressure made me have a mental breakdown in college. I was diagnosed with many illnesses mentally. Finished my first round with a 3.98. Got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Fucked my body and memory so bad, I had to quit my job working at our doctor's office. Developed severe myofascial pelvic pain syndrome. I lost everything, including my husband. He cheated and left because not working made me not part of the team. I wish I put more effort into experiences rather than education, as now I'm disabled, and it all feels pointless and worthless as I'm in debt I can't work out of. Story 28. She became a model, stripper, and OnlyFans girl, voted as most likely to succeed with great expectations for her future. God bless the private education system. She spoke of going into politics and law. The modeling must pay better. Either way, gal is making some serious money. Story 29. He went from the smartest dude to the most hurt one. A couple of kids envied his skills and whooped his ass into a coma. After that, he downward spiraled to the abyss and found drugs. Now he's trying to hold it together while working in a bowling alley. Kids are savages. Story 30. Dude signed a multi-million-dollar offer for an engineer at Comptroller who sent him to Europe where he traveled, added to his funds, became friends with a pop idol in Korea, came back here and left again to go be Zaphod Beeblebrox. Guy farted clouds of luck and charisma. Winner, and a genuinely kind man. Story 31. I was one of 19 valedictorians in my class of about 520. No weighted grades, so we all had 4.0 GPA. I got a Bachelor of Science degree at a state university, magna cum laude. Worked lab tech jobs, worked for the Forest Service, moved overseas, earned a master's, and now I'm a park ranger. Doing well academically in high school and college really burnt me out. Now I get to work outdoors, and I'm pretty happy. I still have regrets, and I think about what I could have been, but I try not to let it get to me. No clue what the other 18 valedictorians are up to. Story 32. Smartest 2 people in my year are successful engineers, who are smart enough to work hard, but also enjoy life. Like me, they're weebs, love socializing, and we catch up regularly, be it in person or online to play a few games. It's a simple but happy life. They are my best friends. Thought I'd put something a bit happier after reading the other comments. Story 33. I amounted to nothing. That's what most people would say looking at me. But the truth is, I am living a satisfying and happy life. No debt, because I chose not to go to college. A wonderful woman who is madly in love with me, and I enjoy my free time doing what I love. I'm happy. I'm not rich. I don't have a prestigious job or title, but I am legitimately satisfied with my life. I win. Story 34. I think she got a literature or education degree, and more recently, as we hit our 30s, she's had 2 kids. The grade below me is a bit more interesting. They had 2 really intelligent twins. One works in financial markets. I'm not sure what she does, don't want to say and be wrong. Her brother has had a truly meteoric rise in aerospace engineering. In 5 years, he went from a graduate and an entry-level position writing build manuals, I think, to a project manager for the design of a manned and unmanned, my understanding is that there are variants, space vehicles. He got his pilot's license while in college, and has started back at flight school to get his instrument rating. He's musically gifted as well. In fact, I've known him for 11 years at this point, and I'm not sure I've ever seen him perform poorly at something he set his mind to. Quite the contrary. He's someone who sets a 5-year goal, meets it in a year or less, then sets an even more outlandish 5-year goal, and meets that too.